There are roads that forgive mistakes, and then there are roads that don't. In the mountains of southern Oregon, where ancient forests swallow light and winter erases the world beneath blankets of white, one family discovered which kind they were on. It was supposed to be a simple drive. A peaceful end to Thanksgiving weekend. But for James and Katie Kim and their two small daughters, a single turn transformed their journey into something else entirely. Something that would test the limits of human endurance, the depths of parental love, and the cruel indifference of nature itself. November in the Pacific Northwest carries a particular kind of beauty. The coastline stretches wild and dramatic, waves crashing against rock formations that have stood for millennia. Inland, the Cascade Mountains rise like sentinels, their peaks dusted with the first serious snows of the season. Between these two worlds runs a maze of roads, some paved and maintained, others barely more than suggestions carved into the hillsides by logging companies decades ago. Most drivers never see these forgotten arteries. They stick to the highways, the reliable routes that connect city to city with predictable efficiency. But every year, a handful of travelers make a different choice. They follow a line on a map that promises a shortcut, a scenic alternative, a faster way home. And every year, some of those travelers vanish into the green silence. James Kim understood technology. As a senior editor at CNET, one of the most influential tech publications of the early 2000s, he spent his days dissecting the latest gadgets, explaining complex innovations in ways that made sense to millions. His video segments, featuring him in a lab coat examining everything from cameras to laptops, had made him a familiar face to anyone who followed consumer electronics. He was analytical, thorough, methodical. These were the qualities that made him excellent at his job. They were also the qualities that made him believe he could solve any problem if he just had enough information. Katie brought a different kind of strength to their partnership. At 30, she'd built 2 successful clothing boutiques in San Francisco, navigating the brutal economics of retail fashion with the kind of toughness you don't find in textbooks. Raised in New Mexico, she'd grown up understanding that the world didn't always cooperate with your plans, that sometimes you had to adapt faster than seemed possible. Together, they'd created a life that balanced ambition with adventure. Their daughters, 4-year-old Penelope and 7-month-old Sabine, joined them on road trips up and down the California coast, camping weekends, explorations of national parks. The Kims weren't reckless. They were experienced. They were prepared. Or so they believed. The Thanksgiving holiday of 2006 started exactly as they'd hoped. The drive north to Seattle gave them time to imagine a different future. San Francisco had been good to them, but the constant hustle, the traffic, the expense, it was wearing them down. Seattle offered something softer. Green neighborhoods. Rain instead of fog. Space for the girls to grow. They spent the holiday weekend walking through districts they might call home, pricing houses they might buy, constructing a vision of their next chapter. The return trip was meant to be leisurely. They'd stop halfway, spend a night at a coastal inn, let the girls run on a beach before finishing the drive. Katie called ahead from Portland and booked a room at 22 Lodge, a riverside retreat near Gold Beach that promised quiet and comfort. The woman who took the reservation mentioned that they'd be arriving late, past 11, but said the key would be waiting. Everything was arranged. Everything was under control. Except that afternoon stretched longer than expected. Lunch with Katie's friend ran over. The girls needed diaper changes, snacks, bathroom stops. By the time they left Portland, the sun was already sinking toward the horizon, painting the western sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been beautiful if they weren't also a countdown. James drove south on Interstate 5, the straightforward route, while Katie navigated using a Rand McNally Road Atlas. This was 2006. GPS existed, but it wasn't in every car yet, wasn't embedded in every phone. Paper maps were still the standard, still trusted, still treated as authoritative guides to the world. When they stopped for dinner at a Denny's in Roseburg around 9 p.m., exhaustion was already setting in. 2 young children in a car for hours creates a special kind of chaos. Sabine needed to be fed. Penelope was restless, bored, asking when they'd get there with the persistence only a 4-year-old can manage. James and Katie spread the map across the table between plates of eggs and pancakes, tracing the route they still needed to cover. Highway 42 would take them west toward the coast, an easy drive that would deliver them to the lodge before midnight. But in the darkness, fatigue blurring their attention, they missed the turn. It's the kind of mistake that happens 1,000 times a day on American roads. You're watching for a sign, a landmark, and it slips past while you're adjusting the radio or answering a child's question or simply not paying attention for 5 crucial seconds. Under normal circumstances, you just course correct. You take the next exit, circle back, lose maybe 10 minutes. This wasn't normal circumstances. When James realized they'd overshot their turn, he pulled over. Flashlight in hand, he studied the map again, and that's when he saw it. Another route. Bear Camp Road, marked on the atlas as a thin line connecting the interstate to the coast. It looked direct. It looked simple. What it didn't look was dangerous, because maps don't show danger the way they show distance. They don't indicate that a road is passable only 4 months of the year. They don't warn you that what appears as a casual alternative is actually a high mountain pass that logging trucks use in summer and absolutely no one uses once snow starts falling. The map said it was a road. James trusted the map. The first hour wasn't alarming. Bear Camp Road started as pavement, narrow but solid, winding upward through stands of Douglas fir and cedar. The headlights swept across tree trunks, caught the reflection of animal eyes watching from the darkness, revealed nothing that suggested they'd made a catastrophic error. But the higher they climbed, the colder it became. Snow began as flurries, pretty and harmless, the kind you might see in a holiday movie. Then it thickened. The flakes grew heavy, wet, accumulating on the windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. Visibility collapsed from hundreds of yards to dozens, then to just the tunnel of light immediately ahead. James slowed to a crawl, hunched forward, gripping the wheel with both hands. In the back seat, Katie held both girls, trying to keep them calm even as her own anxiety spiked. They'd been driving for nearly 2 hours since leaving the restaurant. They should have reached the coast by now. Instead, they were climbing higher into mountains that seemed to go on forever. Then came the junction. Mile marker 12. In daylight, the intersection might have been obvious, but at night, in heavy snow, it became a puzzle. The main road curved sharply to the left and looked like it was narrowing to nothing. To the right, a wider track branched off, appearing to be the logical continuation of the route they were following. There was no sign. No indication of which way led where. Just 2 paths disappearing into the storm. James chose right. It's impossible to know exactly why. Maybe the wider track looked more traveled. Maybe he was following some instinct about how roads should flow. Maybe he was just guessing. Whatever the reason, the moment the Saab's tires left the main road and turned onto that logging spur, their situation changed from difficult to deadly. The track deteriorated rapidly. The snow deepened from inches to feet. Ruts became trenches that scraped the underside of the car. Branches hung so low that James had to stop repeatedly, get out into the freezing wind, and physically clear the path. Each time he stepped outside, the cold hit him like a physical blow. His jacket was a light shell, meant for San Francisco autumns, not mountain winters. His shoes were sneakers, soaked through within minutes. But he kept going because turning around in that narrow space, with those deep ruts, seemed impossible. Forward felt like the only option, even as forward kept getting worse. Katie tried calling 911. No signal. She tried again. Nothing. The mountains formed walls around them, blocking radio waves as effectively as they blocked light. They were alone in a way that people in the 21st century rarely experience, truly cut off, unreachable, invisible to the world. After hours of brutal, grinding progress, James finally accepted that they had to retreat. The track ahead had become impassable, drifts too deep, the grade too steep. He began the agonizing process of backing down the logging road, inch by inch, using mirrors that showed nothing but swirling white, relying on feel and prayer not to slip off the edge into whatever lay beyond. It took hours. When they finally reached the three-way junction again, it was past 3 a.m. Both of them were shaking from stress and cold. The girls had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the motion and the tension they couldn't understand but could certainly feel. James and Katie looked at each other in the dim glow of the dashboard lights and made a decision. They would wait for morning. Daylight would clarify things. Daylight would show them the way out. But morning brought no rescue. It brought only more snow and the terrible realization that they were trapped. The track behind them was now buried under fresh accumulation. The paths ahead offered no certainty, no promise of salvation. They were at an unmarked intersection in an unmapped wilderness, and nobody knew where they were. The first day of waiting carried a fragile optimism. Surely someone would notice they hadn't arrived. Surely the lodge would raise an alarm. Surely searchers would come. But the second day passed in silence. The third. The fourth. Each morning, James would step outside, searching for tire tracks, for any sign that snowplows operated in this area. He found nothing. The road they'd seen being plowed at the entrance to Bear Camp, miles behind them now, never extended this far. This spur was seasonal, abandoned until spring, and the gate that should have blocked access had been left open by accident or vandalism. No one was coming because no one had any reason to come here. They began rationing immediately. The food they'd packed for a short trip, crackers, fruit pouches, baby food, had to stretch across days with no clear end. James ran the engine in short bursts, just long enough to take the deadly edge off the cold, terrified of burning through their fuel. At night, the temperature dropped below zero. They huddled together, all four of them, sharing body heat, layering every piece of clothing they had. Katie made a choice that probably saved both girls' lives. She started nursing again, not just Sabine, but Penelope too. It was the only reliable source of nutrition they had, and she forced herself to eat the majority of their remaining food to keep producing milk, even as hunger gnawed at her constantly. James tried to stay busy, tried to maintain some sense of purpose. He studied the map obsessively, as if staring at it hard enough would reveal some hidden escape route. He stepped outside every few hours, listening for engines, for voices, for helicopter rotors. He heard only wind and the occasional crack of tree branches breaking under the weight of ice. By the seventh day, the fuel tank hit empty. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. The heater went silent. Within an hour, the interior of the car became a refrigerator. Within 3 hours, it became a freezer. James made one final attempt to signal for help. He removed one of the tires, dragged it away from the car, and set it on fire. Black smoke poured into the sky, thick and unmistakable, the kind of signal that should draw attention from miles away. He fed the flames with branches, with pieces of fabric, with anything that would burn. Katie watched through the window as her husband, gaunt and exhausted, tended the fire with desperate intensity. Then they heard it. The drone of an aircraft. A small plane, flying low enough that they could see its shape against the clouds. James waved frantically. Katie opened the door, shouting even though she knew they couldn't hear her. The plane circled once. For a moment, hope exploded in their chests, so powerful it was almost painful. Then the plane straightened out and continued on its path, disappearing over the ridge. They hadn't been seen. That night, James and Katie had the conversation they'd both been avoiding. They whispered in the darkness while the girls slept between them, their breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. The map showed a town called Gallus somewhere to the northwest. Maybe 4 miles away. Maybe closer. It was impossible to tell exact distances in terrain this rugged, but it was their only option. Someone had to go for help. Someone had to walk out. Katie begged him not to. He had no gear, no proper clothing, no equipment. But they both understood the mathematics of the situation. The car was out of fuel. The temperature was killing them slowly. The girls couldn't survive much longer without heat, without real food. Staying meant certain death for everyone. Leaving meant a chance, however slim, that at least some of them might live. James promised he'd be back before sunset. He promised he'd bring help. He promised everything he could think of to make the moment less terrible. At 7:45 a.m. on December 4th, he stepped out of the car and into the forest. Katie watched him disappear between the trees, and some part of her knew she was watching him for the last time. The hours that followed were the longest of Katie's life. She played with the girls, sang songs, told stories, did anything to keep them distracted and moving because movement generated heat and heat meant survival. She kept checking her watch. Noon passed. Afternoon. Sunset. The darkness came early in the mountains, and with it came the crushing certainty that James wasn't coming back. He'd promised sunset. He'd promised. But the forest had swallowed him, and Katie was alone with 2 small children in a metal coffin filling slowly with cold. She tried shouting his name into the darkness. The silence that answered was absolute. On the morning of December 5th, Katie made her decision. They couldn't stay. The car offered no protection now, just the illusion of shelter. She bundled the girls in every layer she could find, picked up Sabine, took Penelope's hand, and grabbed 2 items, a bright pink umbrella and a small makeup mirror. They were going to walk out or die trying. The snow was waist deep. After 50 feet, Katie was gasping, her legs burning, Sabine heavy in her arms, Penelope crying from exhaustion. She knew they wouldn't make it a mile. Then she heard the sound. Helicopter rotors. Distant at first, then closer, sweeping across the canyon. Katie ran toward a clearing, waving the pink umbrella like a flag, screaming even though her voice was just another sound lost in the rotor wash. The helicopter circled. Descended. A man leaned out, saw them, saw the impossible sight of a woman and 2 children in the middle of nowhere, and radioed for help. John Renaer, a businessman flying his own helicopter in hopes of spotting something, anything, had just saved 3 lives. Katie collapsed when they airlifted her to safety. She kept asking about James, kept saying he'd gone for help, kept insisting he must have made it. No one had the heart to tell her immediately that he hadn't. That search teams were only now beginning to trace his path through the wilderness. They found his trail the next day. Footprints leading down into Big Windy Creek Canyon. Pieces of clothing tied to branches, markers he'd left to guide his way or guide rescuers. Scraps of the map, torn and scattered. He'd made it farther than anyone expected. Miles into terrain that should have stopped him in hours. But hypothermia is patient. It steals your warmth degree by degree, slows your thinking, convinces you that lying down is reasonable, that sleep is the answer. On December 6th, a helicopter pilot spotted him in the creek bed, half submerged in shallow freezing water. The autopsy would later determine he'd survived approximately 2 days after leaving the car. 2 days of walking through snow in sneakers and a light jacket. 2 days fighting for his family. 2 days that ended face up in a stream, alone in the wilderness he'd tried so desperately to conquer. The story tore through the media like wildfire. James Kim's name became synonymous with parental sacrifice, with the terrible choices people face when survival becomes the only goal. CNET created a memorial fund. Thousands of people who'd never met him wrote tributes. News outlets examined every decision, every turn, every moment where things might have gone differently. Oregon officials launched investigations into why the gate had been left open, why signage was inadequate, why rescue response had been so delayed. Changes were made. Roads were better marked. Emergency protocols were revised. James Kim's death purchased small improvements in a system that had failed his family catastrophically. Katie and her daughters returned to San Francisco. They rebuilt their lives slowly, painfully, carrying the weight of what happened in those mountains. Penelope and Sabine grew up knowing their father as the man who walked into a winter storm so they might live. It's a legacy built from love and loss in equal measure. There are roads that forgive mistakes, and roads that don't. Bear Camp Road doesn't forgive. It stands today much as it did then, beautiful and treacherous, waiting patiently for the next traveler who trusts a map more than the warnings written in snow and silence. James Kim's story is a reminder that nature doesn't negotiate, doesn't grant second chances because you're a good person or a loving father or someone who deserves better. The wilderness is indifferent. Survival requires more than courage. It requires luck, and sometimes, even luck isn't enough.